What is up, everyone? Welcome to the ultimate guide to estimating complex exteriors. Glad everyone could be here. It's exciting. Kind of our first time going through some of this stuff as a group. Um, and we're just so happy you could make it out. I think this is going to be really beneficial for everybody. I am John from PaintScout, and Michael Murray here is with me. Together, we run the Price Sell Paint podcast and come with a wealth of knowledge. So I'll start just by introducing myself. So for those who don't know me, I am the CEO of PaintScout, but also I have a vast background in the painting industry as well. Probably being involved in, I want to say, individually selling maybe $10 million of painting projects and managing a sales team probably has sold 50, 60 million. And then just being involved in the PaintScout community, having developed this product and helping now, you know, hundreds, thousands of contractors just figure out this hard part of the industry of estimating. And I'm excited to share my knowledge. Michael, what
Yeah,
about you?
hey, yeah, excited to join today. So I live in Cleveland, Ohio area, run a company called Textbook Painting. Started running a painting company when I was a freshman in college. All we did was exteriors, so I'm excited to get back to the roots here, talk about exterior estimating, which I've been doing for just over 20 years now. So yeah, I'm really excited and looking forward to what we have today.
Awesome. So the way things are going to work is we're going to go through an exterior estimate, something complicated, more of a heritage home. And Michael and I are going to estimate that by using PaintScout. And we're going to show you how we would do that, kind of offering both our individual perspectives on it and trying to just get this estimate done as fast as possible so we can answer everyone's questions. And we're going to have a large extended question and answer period at the end. So we have a bunch of questions that we get here all the time at PaintScout, things that you guys as the community are interested to know. So we'll touch on some of that. But ultimately, we're here for you. We're here to discuss this, help you guys with any needs you have, and just try to make this better for everyone. So yeah, let's just have some fun here. You know, everyone
Oh,
loves exterior exterior painting and estimating. So let me share my screen here, and we'll get into it.
good to go.
Awesome. Okay, good to go. So I know this is something I have encountered a little bit. Michael, you're way more versed in this in the Cleveland area, isn't that right?
Yeah, we see homes like this all the time. We paint a lot of homes that look just like this now, and like I said, for 20 years or whatever. So yeah, this is my
Amazing.
jam. I love doing
This
this.
is your jam. Awesome.
For better or
So
worse.
yeah,
Got to be good
for
at
those
something.
for those in the session, if you got does anybody else encounter this, feel free to leave some notes in the chat. Love to kind of hear if you guys see this kind of thing. And as we go through it, you know, stuff that you're thinking about, stuff that you want to know, feel free to put that in the chat as well. So let's get started here, Michael. So you show up at this house, we're estimating the exterior. They want the whole thing redone, soffit, fascia, siding, trim, everything. Where are you going to start? What are we doing?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, so we have measurements on screen. First thing we need to do is just figure out some basic measurements. We use a measuring wheel. It's when we're outside. I think there's a lot of different ways to do that. So anyways, we got to get our measurements here. Again, we have those on screen, so luckily we're good to go. The way
And
that we
for
think
those
about
who
it.
are, Michael,
Oh, go
for those
ahead.
who are listening, I should clarify too.
Yeah.
Oh, someone, okay, we got to expand the screen here. Okay, yeah, as we're talking about it here, there we go. Hopefully that's better. As we're talking about this, both Michael and I come from a background of production rate estimating or estimating with time. And so what we're doing is we're taking measurements, we're applying a time-based rate to it that we tweak for our teams and change as we've gone through our experience in the industry. And so for those who aren't familiar with that, that's what we're going to be talking about. And PaintScout works tremendously well when you've got a system like that. We can hammer out an estimate like this probably in 5 to 10 minutes. So
Yep.
I just want to give some people some background on what we're doing so that it doesn't sound like crazy talk as we're going through this.
Yeah. No, that's
So
good.
yeah, so
So
Michael, go ahead. Best ways
yeah.
to
So
get measurements.
Yeah, so like I was saying, I mean, when I first started, honestly, we would walk it off, right? So I knew when I was a college student, this I was trained to do it. I had figured out how long of a step I could take. That would be about a 3 foot. I would walk it off, multiply my steps by three. Now we're a little bit fancier, and we have measuring wheels, which we can buy on Amazon for 40 or $50. The height of it, we always just use 10 feet per story. Makes math really easy. But yeah, I've been doing production rates back to 2003. We used to do it literally a piece of paper, scratch pad with a pencil. And so I got really good at mental math, especially multiplying by 10 makes it pretty easy. And
Math
so I think,
genius.
yeah, right. And so having 10 feet per story, I think is just a pretty good default answer, um, even when you're using, PaintScout or whatever.
Mhm. Awesome. So yeah, it's interesting. Patrick also says 10 feet per story. So,
Yep.
this is kind of pretty standard um, for us. And yeah, for the measuring wheel, awesome. I did the exact same thing, walk it out. Sometimes we would use a laser measure, honestly, to get the height. If it was a little, like I would back check my heights, especially if I'm dealing with like brick where I can't tell exactly, how many stories we're dealing with. Or I would laser measure, like I put a rock in the lawn, laser measure the rock. So there's a couple of ways to get it, but ultimately getting your measurements is key. We're not talking about perfection though here at the end of the day. I don't think either of us would say that. It's more, it has to do with, um, getting something that's near perfect. So good, not perfect is kind of what we're going for. So yeah, when we get to a house like this, it's really going to depend on what the client wants at the end of the day. But we know that this case they want to change colors and protect everything. So we're going with 2 coats on this whole house. And so I'm going to start adding in a couple surfaces here just to kind of get this going. So I'm going to minimize that down. Actually, before I do that, here's a couple more pictures of the house, just so we all have a reference. There we go. So we're talking about a 3-story home here. We'll add in a couple of pillars here. It looks like this porch is probably a composite decking. Big ceiling on the porch, so we got to keep that in mind. And yeah, here's the home. So I'm gonna open up PaintScout here and start putting things in. The way that we have always done it is to break down the home into sides. And what this does is helps us control the estimate, control options for the customer, and also just give our crew a better overall picture of how things should work once they get to the job. And so in this case, I'm going to enter in, this being the front side of the home. I'm not sure what the direction is, but we do here have we'll add an area. We're gonna, you go north wall, whole house, west wall. In my experience, we just go with front of home, and I'm going to put those dimensions in. So we've got a length here of 35 feet side to side, and the width, and Michael, maybe you can add your opinion here on this, but sorry, the length 35, height is 30 feet. Would you enter that in as 30 feet, or would you do this by individual sections? How would you go about that?
So at this point, I would put 20.
Put 20. Okay.
Yeah, because the main parts of the house are those first 2 stories, and I'm going to think of the dormer and that turret kind of separately.
Awesome. Yep, sounds good. So we've got the height and the width in there. We're going to go confirm, add that in. So from here, we're going to start adding in our surfaces, our substrates here, and then we're going to start working with those. So is that what you do, Michael? Start adding
Yep.
those things in? Okay.
For sure. Yeah, I think if you want to show real quick, if you click on picture that's label number 2, you'll see that the first story is more of a like hardboard, you know, wood siding,
Yeah, I
where
can
the
see it here.
top story, yeah, there you go. And that top story is more of a like, cedar shake or shingle shake kind of a substrate. And so what I would encourage, and I think you would say the same thing, is like those 2 surfaces take a different amount of time to paint.
Hmm,
The second story, that cedar shake, is a lot more complicated. I know some people were chatting before, like this isn't something the type of house you see all the time. It doesn't really matter what type of house it is. It's really just understanding how to do this type of complexity.
absolutely.
So we would have a
So,
different substrate for, the lap siding and the cedar shake. So I would want to
okay.
separate those.
Okay. So should we add in both of those then, or should we just consider it one for this example?
I mean, if we can, real quick, I think let's do them separately. I think it should be pretty
Okay.
easy.
Okay. So we're going to add in cedar shingles here,
Perfect.
and we're going to add in our clapboard siding.
Perfect.
There we go. So from here, what we've got is obviously that's taking into account the whole area though. right? So we need to adjust that down. So we're going to come in here and we've got the length and height. So we'll just change this back to 10 feet on
Perfect.
that area. And we're going to do the same on the clapboard. This is also going to help if there's different products, that kind of thing as well. So at this point, we're just itemizing. We will do some of the prep work after once we've got all this in. So does that work for you,
I
Michael,
like
or how would you guys do that?
Yeah, I like that. Yep.
Okay,
That's
perfect. So we're going
exactly
to
how
add
we would do it.
this. We've got those two different types of siding. Now let's add in some soffit fascia. Makes
Perfect.
sense, okay? And how would you itemize some of this stuff?
Yeah. So I mean, on this house, we would have, again, the substrates are going to be built a little bit different depending on your account. So we would have a fascia. So like kind of running along. I'm going to think, I like to think from the top down. It's going to help me to stay organized, so I'm not just bouncing all over the place. If you want to go back to picture 5, just back to that front view, it might be a little bit easier. Um, and so I'm going to have like that topmost fascia board. On most houses, you probably have some sort of a gutter running there, but in this case, it doesn't look like we do. So I'm going to have that. It also looks like we have a fascia kind of running along the middle of the house between the first and second story.
Mhm.
So I'm going to have 70, without getting too complicated, feet of fascia for those two areas.
Yep. All right, so let's add that in. So we've got the fascia here, and we've got fascia only one story. How does that rate compare? 20 linear feet?
That sounds pretty good. Yeah, I think it might
Okay.
be touch lower than what our standard is. I think we're typically in that like 25 to 30, but
Okay, awesome.
everybody needs to have their own production rates.
Absolutely. So it's a great baseline for how this might work, but you want to measure this over time.
Yep.
I've always found soffit fascia to be a little bit, more complicated, so we tend to add a little more time
Yeah.
for access, that kind of thing at the end of the day. So we've
Um,
got, so you said 70. That's what you've got?
yeah, and just to clarify that, right? So I know that the width is 35,
Yeah.
right? Again, if you're on site, you would have measured that, but in this case, we can see the picture has that as our given dimension. And to me, so to Daniel's question, how do we come up with 70? It's because I doubled it, right? So at the top of the second story, along the roof line, I have fascia, that white trim board. And then in the middle of the house, at the top of the porch, and then to the right, kind of right above that window, it looks like there's a piece of white fascia as well.
Mhm. Like right here,
Yep.
is there fascia there? Yeah, okay. Yep.
It's again, it's if you're on site, like sometimes it's difficult in a picture, but when you're on site, this stuff should be pretty obvious.
Absolutely. So we're trying to figure out the total length of all fascia facing out of the front of the home
Correct. And
as an
so,
area. Yeah.
yep. And so I would personally add this as a separate line item, again called fascia, but I do need to account for that, what looks like a red fascia board, kind of towards the middle of the house there as well. So if you
And
want
that's
to
this
put
guy
that,
right here. Yeah.
yep. So if you want to put it all in, then now we've got 105 feet of fascia. Either it's going to come out in the wash.
Okay. So put 105 in there. And we got a rate of 20. And
Of
so
course.
it looks like we got 5.5 hours to paint that. Um, I always kind of do a little bit of a mental check on that. 5.5 hours, 2 coats. My gut tells me it might be a little, like maybe not enough time. How do you feel
Okay.
about that?
Yeah, I think there's some complexity with, getting around some of these big bushes. We never like to set a ladder on top of a roof. I know that there's some ways to do that a little bit safer, but ideally we want to avoid that with maybe a lift. And so I think depending on how you're getting to some of these areas is going to affect how quickly you can do it as well.
For sure. And sometimes like these more, if we're talking about a standard kind of track home, fascia does come out at about 20. Once you deal with a little bit more of a, complex, older fascia that's maybe a little more intricate,
Yep.
you're probably talking about, I'm thinking it's probably about 15. I'm going to add a little bit
Perfect.
of time on there, give about a day
Yep.
for a person. So,
And,
um,
and I think the other way you can do that, right, when we just to be, show that or whatever, is you could just click on that painting box and just add some time manually, just make the 7, an 8, or a 9,
sure.
right? And that might, at the end of the day, really what we're trying to do is give the painters enough time to be able to safely accomplish the task.
Absolutely. And so this is the kind of thing where you can also build custom rates into the system that kind of tackle some of this stuff. But at the end of the day, you do have to use a little bit of a judgment call on some of these things. So, um, all right. So let's do that. So we'll add that in. What should we do next?
Yeah, again, I know we're trying to do this relatively quickly, so we're probably not going to cover every last little detail on this house because we do want to leave a lot of time for questions. We've got to tackle some of these complicated things. So we've got this dormer, this turret, and the porch. I would say are all fairly complicated.
Hmm.
Um, you pick. Where do you want to start?
Let's start with the dormers.
Cool.
Start with the dormer at the top. Yeah. So let's. I'm gonna go add an area here. We're gonna go sorry, add a substrate, and let's go dormer. Okay. So um, we need to actually sorry, my bad here. So we're here. We are adding into the estimate, add a substrate. Yeah, so same thing. So we'll do the dormer. Add some dormer here. And um, here we need to add time for the siding. Do you do this all as one thing, Michael, or how would you break this out?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two ways to do this. So I can add, some square footage to my cedar shake. I can add some more fascia, some soffit, some window, and things like that. The way that we generally think about it is we will have a production rate for a one window dormer, and it's going to kind of account for all of that, plus the time it takes to safely get up there.
Okay.
And so like for us, that dormer looks to be about an 8-hour dormer. Which is going to include, we're going to have a lift on site for this project. So it's going to include like getting the lift into position, setting it up, all that kind of fun stuff. Again, it's always hard to tell from pictures, but there's dormers are complicated. I don't want to underquote how much time a dormer is going to take where somebody's rushing and could obviously get hurt.
For sure. So here, just so everyone can see, so we've added a substrate to the front of the home. We're calling this a one window dormer third story for our internal work order. To the client, we're just saying dormer. So they don't really need to know all those details. As Michael's saying, you would go probably with an hours per item on a
Yep.
1 hour third story. Okay. And you guys might have this actually programmed into your system, but
Yep.
this is good for people to see kind of how, for everyone to see how we would actually think through adding this type of thing into the system. So we've got one of these, and you would probably go with, walk everyone through kind of the hours you would look at for something like this and how you'd actually put it in the system.
I mean, to your point, we would just have this as I wouldn't use, I mean, I would have an 8 for hours per item if,
Okay.
I think that is the actual production rate we use.
Okay.
Or I could pull this all apart and do it just like we did the first and second story in terms of the different substrates with the siding, trim, window, whatever.
Right.
And then, at that point, if you were to break this apart, you'd probably end up with like 4 to 5 hours to paint it and roughly like 3 hours or so for like safety time, getting the lift into a position, things like that. Rick's asking how you gonna get a lift in the yard. Again, it's hard. It's so hard to tell when you're looking at pictures. I'm probably coming in from the driveway. I'm probably coming in from the side yard. It's hard to tell without actually being there. If we have to do it from ladders, it's going to take a lot more time.
So yes, we got Peter's asking, how if you guys were to do it with ladders, how would you assess that?
Yeah, I mean, I think somewhere in the neighborhood of like an extra third to half the time. So if it's 8 from a lift, it's 10 to 12 from ladders.
Mhm.
Just going to add a lot more complexity, probably having people footing ladders for safety. We're going to have to tie off somewhere above that because at some point you're probably going to have to step out onto that roof if you're using ladders um, to be able to like paint some of the sides of the dormers, which is really like the problem. The front of the dormers generally not too bad. It's the sides that can get to be an issue safely.
Absolutely. And so this 8 hours, like what we're talking about is, and we do it the same way, by the way. It's just we've broken these things apart, and we've instead of having to do all of this on site, where you're getting the exact square footage of your shingles, you're getting the window, you're getting the fascia, soffit, upper fascia, whatever. I mean, these can be kind of standard items depending on what kind of homes you're working on, and so it can be easier just to do that one time, package it together, and have a rough amount of time associated to it, I would say. So,
And I'd
and
rather
there,
be
yeah,
high, right? I mean, just to get back to the point, right? Somebody might be saying, "Oh, that's not going to take 8 hours. It's only going to take 6." And it's like, great. Like, then just be happy that you got an extra 2 hours that you can beat the budget on. Like, again, I want to quote that part of this house high. The last thing I want to do when I look at this house is give them a low price.
mhm,
That's the worst case scenario. There's
Yep,
not like, again, we're talking about a complicated section on a complicated house.
for sure. And there's nothing worse than getting this to your crew after from a work order perspective and having them be like, well, you want me to do this in 2 hours? Like, nothing brings down morale like that. So I
For
would
sure.
totally agree. And so, when we're talking about adding that dormer, so we got 8 hours. Would you put, we've had a few questions about prep time. Um, and so we'll maybe just talk about that in a second. But in this case, do you account for prep time or is this mostly just setup?
The way that we do prep time is just as like a separate line item for the whole front of the house.
Yeah.
I don't look at it necessarily per like individual piece. Um, I would say like kind of like as a default, it's usually in the neighborhood of like on a house like this, we're probably in the neighborhood of about 20 to 25
Hmm.
hours to prep the front of this house. Again, it's going to depend on the condition. Like, could this be 10 hours to prep it? For sure. It's really hard to tell from a picture. Is some of this paint peeling? If it's stained and it's not peeling at all, we might only have 5 to 10 hours of, some setup time and caulking and minimal prep work. But kind of as like a default, when I first look at this house, my mind goes to in the neighborhood of 20 to 25 hours per side.
Let's talk about this a little bit because I think it's really a critical piece in estimating these types of homes. Um, so we've done this for a long time, you and I.
Hmm.
Obviously, I look at it and I think probably 32. And let's break this down a little bit just so everyone understands. So if you were to add another substrate here,
Okay.
I'm going to call this prep. Um, in client label, I often don't put prep in.
Yeah, I
It's
would
nothing,
nothing.
right? So
Yep,
internal label, nothing. Um, and you say you go with just hours. Is that right?
correct.
Hours per item. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about how we get to that time. So when you're looking at this, obviously, like we said, when we've got this experience, if you're trying to train someone new, how do you discuss this with them?
Yeah, I think, training it, I think it's a little bit of the art form of what we do. A lot of it just, how we do that is we just look at pictures together, slash like it's a video showing pictures of, hey, this front of a house in this condition, and we can show, these are projects that we've actually worked on. We can see more of a close up. You can see how much is peeling. This would be 30 hours. And then we go to the next one and it's like not peeling at all. Say similar size house, not peeling much, we're probably closer to 10 hours for prep. And I think we're just training our estimators on like what that looks like by like showing them a bunch of pictures in their first couple weeks with the correct answer.
Correct. Yeah. So I'll break that down a little bit. We have a power wash kind of production rate. So we are washing these homes typically. Lead is a little different, right? Like we haven't really discussed
For
that
sure.
at all here. If this is a lead project, 24, 25 hours is not going to be enough.
Yep.
Um, so you can really lose your shirt. I've been involved in a number of projects with people who have underestimated this type of prep, and that's hard. If you run into a lead project, make sure you have some experience or somebody who can help you.
Hmm.
But yeah, we have a production rate for our washing, and so we know based on square footage just how long it's going to take to wash, and then we're looking at things kind of in terms of breakouts. Um, and so if there's significant scraping, we're breaking that down to a production rate as well. So we know, so many square feet of shingles can be scraped per hour, and depending on the type of scraping needed. So we'll break that out as well. And sometimes it's not the whole thing that needs done. It's only going to be sections. So we're breaking
Hmm.
those out into small sections, itemizing each one of those, and then having a formula to how the prep is going to work that I can discuss with the rep involved. And so everything we're discussing here is about breaking this down into pieces so that we can build it back up into time and how long that's going to take. So prep work is one of those things where it's going to be independent of your painting production rates. You can do it based on, a group feel like you're talking about, Michael. We've definitely
Hmm.
done that. Um, and we've also done it with, specifically with, using some breakout times for different types of things.
Hmm.
So the key here is that we itemize it so that we know how people thought about it, right? Like, if you thought it was 24 hours, I want to know from our reps exactly how you thought about that so that we can have a good discussion And if it doesn't go to 24 hours, we need to make adjustments.
Yep.
So, um, so that's kind of how the way that we are doing that. Um,
Yeah, I think it's just like, I think Michael's asking a question here about like, can we get your production rates? And it's you don't there is no like you need to figure out your own production rates, but especially on prep work, it is you need to have a lot of them or some understanding of like that's where the experience is going to come in a little bit. And that's where if you we all of the estimators we hire, generally speaking, don't have painting experience. And so the way that we force that experience is in their first month, they're looking at a lot of photos of prep work. Everything else, we've basically taken out the experience needed part of it because it's like if you can measure length and width or count windows, count doors, things like that, you're going to get the right answer. It's the prep work that you can really get in trouble on. But really what it comes down to is just like how much prep can you do in an hour? And if it's, 50 square feet, perfect. Now you've got a production rate. And it's just like entering that into your PaintScout and knowing like, and then labeling that correctly so that, you can understand like, this is a minimal prep house. This is a lot of prep house. This is a medium, however you want to label that so that you can train it then.
yeah. So yeah, Godfrey, I mean, you make a good point here with, using five production rates for every element.
Sure.
You can break this down as detailed as you want. And I think that point speaks to this where, we have people that actually build in tape and plastic to every single rate.
Hmm.
And we also have the approach that, Michael and I have come to, which is that, good, not perfect is okay as well. And so it really depends on your comfort level and how much you want to, um, I guess, invest in terms of time and making it really specific versus just getting to a point where um, you understand there's going to be some good projects, some bad projects. Ultimately, you want those to kind of even out at the end of the day, and that's how
Yep.
you run your business. So that's the way I view it. I don't know,
Yeah.
Michael, do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah. Same. Yeah. I see Jesse was asking about like a stucco style house from Florida. Obviously, we're not going to get to that today. John, I think that would be great for you and I to record for the YouTube channel.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, we see stucco style houses here in Cleveland, not a ton of them. Certainly not like, maybe Arizona or Florida, but definitely have some thoughts and we'll record a video and share that on YouTube.
I think all the principles we're talking about remain the same.
Yep.
Um, it might, I don't know, I mean, it might not be as complex. I think we always try to go to the most complex things to give everyone a chance to kind of see inside of our heads for that. Stucco, in a lot of cases, a little bit easier. I could be wrong, but getting your square footage on the stucco and the trim, um, that's something we'll definitely cover.
For
So,
sure.
so let's kind of show this too. So, I'm going to add just to kind of go through this quickly. Someone asked if this is recorded. I'm pretty sure it is.
Yes.
It is perfect. So yeah, feel free to go through it after. Let's power through the next 5 minutes, Michael.
Cool.
Maybe not explain our thought process, but let's just add stuff in here. So, let's get the windows in. So we're going to add these windows. How do you view the windows, or how would you put this in?
Yeah, if we're counting the turret, I mean, I've got one, two, three, kind of on the left. If we're counting that dormer separately, I've got
Yeah.
two on the right. I'm just counting them up.
Yeah.
For us, we have different substrates based on like the style of window or the size of the window. You can see that here. Um, I'm calling them medium windows probably. Again, it's,
Yep.
everybody's going to call that slightly different. Don't get too hung up on the like specificity of these production rates because again, everybody should have their own. And so I think for the sake of simplicity, seven, the
It's a medium.
turret thing, we've got, I don't know if you want to hit that. It looks like four,
Let's take a look here.
five.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe
Okay.
9. Okay. Got 9 windows, 9 medium. Let's add
Yeah.
that
I mean,
in. We
again,
got
if
a
somebody's watching this and they're like, wait, I thought it was 10. It's like, again, that don't get caught up in that detail. Like when you're on site, that's the easy part.
yeah. Okay, so we got a door frame here. Let's add that in.
Yep. While you're doing that, Peter's asking, how do you calculate a large bay window? I think, again, you could have a substrate for that, which would be the easy answer. If it's something you see one off, it's like, I don't really ever see this, but man, that one house had it. Just that's where you just go to something and adjust from there. So it's like if we know that like that bay window is maybe looks like kind of 3 times the size of a regular window, then just add in 3 regular windows and it's going to give you enough time.
Hmm.
Because again, at the end of the day, what we call things doesn't really matter. It's just about making sure we have enough time so we can charge appropriately.
Yeah, and to your point, Michael, like my view of windows is slightly different. Where like we count the panes of glass, and so in this case, I'm going to have small windows, but each pane of glass I consider a small window because we
Mhm.
it looks like there's wood in between.
Yep.
So
Okay.
that's the way we count it up. So our windows would be 2 hours, and that just kind of accounts differently. Ultimately, what's interesting is that Michael and I often come up very close in our estimates, but some individual pieces are a little bit different.
Yeah,
So.
we t at textbook we think of things as like a wood window. We would call it a wood double hung window versus a casement window, and then
Mhm.
we would also have like the wood trim or like that casing around the window as like a separate item in case because sometimes a lot of times it's like a vinyl window that doesn't need to be painted, but we do need to paint that wood trim, which is going to allow us to do that. So just
Perfect.
another thought.
Okay, let's add two more things in here. Obviously, I think we're not going to be able to cover everything, but let's take the pillars for example. I'm
Perfect.
counting. Let's see here. So we got one, two, three, four, five. Other side,
Cool.
6, 7, 8, 9. Do you
Yep.
get 9?
Yep. That's
Okay,
what I'm looking at.
9 pillars, and we have a pillar rate. These are a little bit more complicated. I'm going to say two
So
hours a pillar. What do you think?
let go into your pillar rate real quick because this is going to go
Okay.
to that like bay window question, right? This is a two color, right? So we've got the white and then it looks like that dark red, a couple like small pieces around it.
Yeah.
And so a standard column in your system is an hour.
Hmm.
I'm guessing just again, I'm making this up, but that's probably just one color. And so,
Yeah.
2 ways to do it, right? We can put 9 in here and then adjust the production rate, or you can just adjust the number and just call it like 12 and you're going to get enough time. I
For
think the
sure.
right answer or the less confusing answer is put in 9
Yep.
and then go in and change the rate from 1 hour per item to maybe, 1.3 or something like that, to add in maybe 1.5 again, just to make it
Sure.
simple, to
Yep.
add in that extra time for that red trim.
Yep. So, I'm going to put internal label here. So I'm going to copy this in for the customer. I'm going to go, um, two color
Perfect.
column. So the crew knows now they've got two colors. They can adjust accordingly. So that's a great example, Michael, of how I would do that as well.
Yep.
Um, all right. We'll just say what was left here. Let's do one more. Uh, we've got door
Railing.
trim. Railing. You want to do the railing? Let's
Sure.
do
I mean,
that.
it's hard.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah, I know
yeah,
railings are tough. So
that's a complicated railing.
yeah.
Again, this is going to be another one of those things where you are going to be adjusting. So you have to have like a standard, right? If you know your standard is maybe just a, simple like 2 inch square, piece of wood spindle, what we're looking at in this picture is much more complicated.
Yeah.
Anybody that's painted for a little while knows that like this type of detail is going to take a lot more time than just a square 2 inch spindle. And so go ahead and click on that railing,
Okay, and we got measurements here roughly of, I want to say it's probably about,
10
I know
feet.
we're at 30, 40 feet, maybe 40 feet of railing. Just for
Yeah,
argument's sake, you'll measure that
sure.
out. But so we're going to go back into here. We're going to add our 40 feet
And I'm gonna
railings.
and I'm gonna
And
change that rate, right? And so it's like so that's saying basically is how far can I get in an hour?
mhm,
And so I'm not going to get 10 linear feet in an hour. I might only get on this like 5. I might get less than that, but just for the sake of simplicity for today, let's just call it 5.
okay, I agree with that. So 8 hours to paint that. Um, I think that's fairly reasonable. Uh, I railings are
Might be
such a
low.
tough one though. Might be
Yeah.
low. Might be
Might
low.
be a
So
little
I
low.
I might
Yeah. You
go
want to call it 3 or 4? Sure.
yeah, 4.
Perfect.
4 feet. I mean, it's crazy once you actually break that down because you're like 4 feet. I mean, what is that like?
Not much. Yeah.
Not that much, but once you actually break this down, you know that standard is 10. 10 hours doesn't seem crazy,
Hmm.
honestly, to me. So, all right,
I
let's
like it.
confirm that. So now we've got all of these different elements we've added, and someone had asked about a template before. You can template some of this stuff in PaintScout. It does make it faster. Some of these more complicated projects, a little harder to template, but you can always put in, standard things first and have the system calculate that. based on some basic dimensions when you do the
Yep.
length, width, and height. So there are some benefits to that.
Yep.
So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add this area. So we've got the front of the home, everything we've put in here, 9 windows, 1 door frame, 9 columns. Always helpful here to itemize things for the customer, just so that, we don't get into some type of an argument at the end as to what was and wasn't included. And so, if we're doing this on multiple sides, I just want to cover this really quickly. Probably
Yeah.
want to wrap this up in like 3 minutes. So what we always do is we break the project down into sides to make it easy to count and measure, and then we'll combine that back into a package price for the customer, because we want to give the customer what they asked for. This is all about the details internally. So I'm going to go and I'm going to copy a few of these things. I'm just going to rename them. This is obviously, let's not get hung up on what the details are. It's just more of an example here. So left side, oops, here we go. Left side of home. Oh boy.
Nothing harder than typing while people are watching.
Around my microphone, exactly. So we'll do that here. Same things. Obviously, we're going to change that, and we'll copy one more time. We'll do 3 sides here just so you can see. And we'll go here back to the name. And we're going to do a right side of home. Oop. Right side of home. Perfect. Confirm. Okay. All right. So what we're doing now is we've added these 3 sides in. Obviously, they're all the same price. That won't be the case in this case. And
So-
what we're going to do, yes, sorry, Michael, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I mean, yeah. So jump into that left side real quick. We can knock that out quickly and just archive everything to do with the porch.
Okay, so we're going to go here. We got railing,
Archive the door frame.
archive the door frame, columns, archive that.
Okay, and so now if you can, hit edit up at the top. So let's get our correct measurements in, because it looks like we've got 24, whatever, 25 feet wide and 20 feet tall.
20 feet tall, perfect. Okay,
And so
confirm that.
the magic of PaintScout, that's just went in and edited all of the dimensions. And as long as we didn't override the calculations on that front, it just calculated all that for us.
Absolutely.
And then it's just a matter of counting up how many windows we have to make sure that that's still accurate.
So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then we've got kind of a larger one. We'll call that 3. So we got 10. So I'm going to go back here into the windows, and I'm going to change this quantity to 10. And we'll go confirm. So now we'll adjust prep, we'll adjust everything else, but this gives you a pretty good sense of how to do that. Obviously, fascia looks like it's still, 2 stories of fascia, so that works as well. So now we've adjusted this price on the second side fairly quickly. And I think that's the idea here, is that once we get all the substrates in, figure out what we're dealing with on the front side, we can then go and copy, adjust very quickly on the other sides.
And so, John, now let's assume we've already done that. Will you group all that up and make it look pretty for the customer?
Absolutely. So I'll go here, I'm going to go group. I'm going to call this painting whole home. And then do you keep this description, Michael, or do you just kind of?
We usually will remove all of the duplicates of it.
Yeah,
but
correct. That's what we do too. So you can do that. You can adjust it as you want. But now we have a package price for the customer. A little easier for them to understand. Less questions. I'm not sure if you guys get this, but the more detail you add, the more questions you get. And sometimes people get hung up on small details. Can't see the forest for the trees kind of thing.
Yep.
So that's always helpful. Elder, great question here. What about your materials? Does it include in your price? Michael, what do you do?
You and I both do something different. So
Yeah.
we have we have materials not included in our labor rate. So if we're looking at a substrate, you would see the material, so called, whatever, Sherwin-Williams, Emerald, whatever you're using. And we have PaintScout calculating how many gallons we need, as well as, we put in obviously the price that we're paying per gallon. And that's all happening within those different substrates.
Yeah. So
You do it different.
we do it different. Yeah. I mean, we know from historical numbers how much paint materials is going to cost us. And so in that case for us, it's 13 to 15%. We shoot on the high side, and we include that in our hourly rate. So we go with an all-inclusive hourly rate for everything we do. Every hour of work, we've identified how much that should cost in order to make our company run. If you're interested in learning about that, There are videos in our education library to show you that. But ultimately, it is as long as we can keep that
Same
number
thing.
at where it should be, then we're gonna hit our profit margins on each job.
Sure.
So
At the
that
end of
took
the
a
day, you and I are going to come up with the same, like the way we do materials, we're going to get to the same point. It's just a matter of like the detail that we can see there. But at the end of the day, like the price is going to be the same.
yep,
You know, if we both charge $70 an hour for the labor without the materials, I'm charging that times all the hours plus the materials, right? And let's just say I've got a price of 21,000. You're not gonna use that 70. You're gonna be 70 plus the materials of that 15%, right? And so
yep,
you're gonna be at, for the sake of argument, close to 80,
hmm
give or take, right? And so it's like your rate is gonna be 80 times the hours, and mine's 70 times the hours plus the materials, and we're gonna end up
yep.
in the same place.
That's the
So,
hope, right? So
yeah.
you'll have more control over over the materials. We go with a long-term approach. So um, Elder also asked, what if you need special materials for this job? How would you include that? Um, in my experience, we do that separately. So special materials are always separate. When we talk about that, included amount of materials, it's kind of our standard, um, you know, mid to high end paint that we've selected, plus the standard materials. If there's going to be variation in that, if we have to do for some reason, this is crazy, no one would ever do this, but an epoxy application on that left side, obviously our material costs are going to go way up. So
Sure.
we do adjust that
Mhm.
um, depending on that need. So
Mhm.
hopefully that helps Elder. I don't know, is that similar to you, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the way that we do it, where we're separating out materials slightly, does allow, I think, us to be a little bit more granular in that way. And I think the way that you do it is probably a little bit easier for an estimator to come in and get trained because it's
Mhm.
one thing that they don't really have to think about.
For sure.
And so it's like, you're sacrificing maybe a little bit of the ability to make granular changes for simplicity. And I think like those are the slight trade-offs. But again, I don't think there's a right answer. I think it's just
No.
like which is more comfortable for you.
So we got a few questions here that were in the Q&A. So Gina is asking, how do you determine production rates? She's with PvP and her interior is always way higher than her competition. Exterior is always lower. Can we help with that?
How do you determine production rates? I mean, I think the simple answer is again, like we've talked about this before, you have to adjust that to your reality. Not to like each crew member, right? But we're looking for is like the average time that it takes for somebody on your team to do things your way. Um, every painting company does prep work slightly different. You're gonna, set up the whatever, like your drop cloths or your plastic or however you're preparing, like, on the exterior, right? How are we going to keep paint off the roof? How are we going to keep paint off the bushes and things like that? Everybody's going to do that a little bit differently. And so it's really hard for us to, when you try to compare your production rate to somebody else's, you have to realize that there can be a lot of complexity that goes into that. And so you can get yourself into a lot of trouble if you're just going to kind of borrow from somebody else's production rates.
Yeah. We, so what's interesting, Gina, is when I started off, I was, I had a small list of production rates. It wasn't big. And I had to, trust that, try it, and then manipulate it as we went. And so, a little scary off the start, but once you start to see those things like, hey, this production rate is too high for interiors or too low for exterior, um, we want to make adjustments. And so part of it's timing, part of it's just getting reporting, breaking things down into individual areas and seeing how people do. Like Michael said, I mean, this is an average rate. Um, Stacy here has also put in a link, Gina, if you need some help with that.
Yep.
Um, and
I think
so, yeah,
Gina too, though, the one thing I want to say is like she's talking about comparing herself to her competition.
yeah,
And so like sometimes that's going to be like a price comparison, I
mhm,
assume. Unless you're actually sitting down with your local competitor and, comparing production rates, which I think could happen. But what I hear in that question is like my price is higher or lower than my competition, so I need to adjust my production rates, which could be the case.
Mm,
But really what you need to do is look at how long did you quote this job to take. So if I quoted this job to take 100 hours, and then how long did it actually take? And if it actually took 120, well, that's not great. Now we need to dig into why. And from there, that's where you just need to be on site. And you need to like watch. And it's like, wait, what? It takes 2 hours. Our painters get to the job site. It takes them 2 hours before they actually start painting anything. And I don't account for any like setup time at the beginning of every day. And I've got 4 painters. That's 8 hours every day. That, that might be we might need to fix how long it's taking our painters to get started.
mhm,
But from an estimating perspective, we also probably want to account for some time for that. It does take a little bit of time. 2 hours seems ridiculous. And so like that's part of it. If we're talking about price, don't, we have to separate those things because the production rate might be giving us the right number of hours, and we just need to raise our hourly rate to, be more profitable or competitive. I would also push back on the idea that like, I don't really care what my competitors are charging. And somebody asked, like, how do you calculate your production rates? Which, again, we've talked about a lot, John. But that's going to be based on my costs. It's not going to be based on what my competitors are charging or like what the feedback I'm getting from customers. Every customer says your price is too high. Like
yeah.
that's going to happen. And so it's just like I need to make sure that I am charging enough to be profitable and to take care of my team members and provide them with the benefits and things that they need, and then I'm going to charge an appropriate amount so that I'm making a fair profit, so that accounts for all the risk that's involved in doing this. And if I can't sell jobs at that point, it might not be that my price is too high. It might be that my sales skills need to improve, or my positioning in the marketplace needs to improve, or whatever.
Hmm.
So just some more complicated thoughts.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'll talk really briefly about how we view sales, 'cause I think it plays into this conversation, which is that our team shoots for a 50% win rate on our estimates. And so half the estimates just aren't the right fit. And we've always, it's been said, I'm not the only one who says this, a lot of people say this, but you win a third of them no matter what. A third of them you're never going to get. And so you kind of fight for this, third in the middle. And that's where, it's going to be about presenting the value to your customer and seeing if that's a good fit for them. So there's a lot that goes into that question, Gina. And part of it is that our company never is going to be the cheapest ever. And we tell our
Mhm.
customers that and then try to see if the value is in alignment. Um, so, um,
Co-
Rick, so
co-
let's get to a couple estimating questions, unless you have something else, Michael.
I was just going to jump to some of the like thoughts over here on the chat. I mean, again, Neri's asking, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing, but just like, hey, can't we just answer this production rate question? Somebody else asked earlier when we were talking about the railing, like, is that brush or roll or spray? You need to answer that for yourself. And so again, this is why, like, I will tell you, like, our production rate for cedar shake, I want to say is 65 square feet an hour. Our production rate for the wood lap siding is 85. Fascias are 30, soffits are 20 linear feet. So like there's some of our base production rates on exteriors. It obviously gets complicated, right? We have, I don't know, 50 different production rates in an exterior project. And we've talked about too, is like in different areas of the country, you're seeing different surfaces and substrates and things like that. And so I don't want to avoid the question, but I also don't want to like if you spray everything and somebody else is brushing and rolling on their wood siding because of like there's a ton of windows on the side of this house that we have to like make sure that we're accounting for that. Um, and you might account for your production rate might include masking the windows where somebody else is separates out masking windows on a per window basis. And so it's like that's a really complicated difference that's going to be dramatic in the amount of time, right? If I say, hey, I can paint 200 square feet in an hour with a sprayer, yes, but that doesn't maybe include masking off the windows, which then I'm going to do at, whatever, 20 minutes per window or something like that. Um, where somebody else might just say, I spray 100 square feet in an hour, but that includes masking the windows. It's like, okay, cool. We're probably going to end up in about the same place. It's just a different way of getting there. So hopefully, I don't know. Again, I'm trying to like, I think we're getting maybe a little bit too caught up in the exact production rates. I will say PCA offers production rates up. So, I think that's a good place to start. John, I think you and I kind of started with that type of standard.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a few things. I mean, a few things with that, but it's a good place to start. And just understanding that the systemization of this is what's important,
Yep.
and for you to understand how you do it, so you can pass off that information one day if that's what you'd like to do. That's what's key is that we use a systemized approach that works for our business. And
Mhm.
so, that said, I mean, like when I was given rates at the start, I was pretty happy with some of the rates, and a lot of those you're going to find in PaintScout. Be able to see those rates, tweak them. Like I mentioned before, the way I view our business is that it's going to be some good, some bad. We're going to balance out, and at the end of the day, as long as we hit our overall hours for the entire year, and if I've priced our time correctly, we are going to make our profit margin. And so it's kind of this wild, like, I think as an industry, we get too fixated on one individual project, and we want them
Yep.
to all go great. Don't get me wrong, but if you do enough projects, hopefully you're going to end up at, revert to the mean essentially.
Yep.
That some go good, some go bad. So that's my approach. Not for everyone, but that's the way I
Yep.
see things. Question here about showing the details. Absolutely. Like when I'm, for example, if I'm going to be doing two panes of window, two panes of glass um, per window, I'm never going to show that the customer is double. It's just going to be way too complicated for them. So I'll adjust that number uh, externally to the customer in the description. But yeah, there's nothing worse than being off base with the customer when you actually present it. Makes you look foolish and hard to close the job at that point. Tyler asks, are you always assuming two coats on your rates? Depends on the
Yep.
project, honestly. We had a question that we were going to cover just about, giving additional additional coats as an option to customers and how we would go about doing that. So it really depends on what your customers are looking for. Two coats, I think most of us know is fairly standard coverage. You might run into a dark color that requires a third, or a light color on a dark color that might be a third as well. So not always. We do have we also have preloaded third coat rates as well.
Yeah, I would say on exteriors, we find one coat is often sufficient for most applications. But again, it also is going to depend on the type of materials you're using and different things like that. So,
Yeah.
and
Carpentry.
primers. And again, we're getting complicated. I don't want to get lost in the weeds here, but
Yeah, yeah. So Patrick asks, what about carpentry, time and materials?
generally, yes, time and
Yeah,
materials.
time and materials. Yeah, we do a
Yeah.
day rate for carpentry. But man, yeah, that's a tough one. Haven't figured that one out. It's too complex. Um, reference point, yeah, PCA. Okay, cool. What else we got here? Do
Yep.
you uh, do you have a rate for decks, fences, or template for that? Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
So we have a rate for all that stuff.
And like on
Uh,
a fence too, we're gonna have like we have shadow box fence, we have board, I think we call it like again, there's more technical terms, but we don't want to get too technical for our estimators and our clients, right? And so we have like boards on same side spaced out and boards on same side butted together. Like those are some of the different types of fencing that we're going to see. And then it's just a length times height. It's going to give us square footage use production rate.
yep. We got David Cooley. Can the system provide painters with instructions with the application process for estimating for? Um, so the system wasn't really built for that. Now you can add uh, crew notes into each substrate, into
Mhm.
each thing. You can do that on the system on the setting side of the system. So there is room for that. But ultimately, it was built as a sales tool and then passing along that information um, to the customers and to the crew. So
Mhm.
yeah, maybe not perfect for that. Um, all right, we got a question here from Tyler. Let me
Yeah, I see
let me
that.
just read it quickly here.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, I think Tyler, to your question of like, sometimes there's going to be a difficult tree on the side of the house that's going to really like screw things up. First of all, you're right. Anybody that's done this long enough knows, yes, that is 100% true. With that being said, I would lean towards like, don't try to make your quote as low as you can. Don't make as high as you can, but like the goal shouldn't be as like, what is the absolute fastest that we could paint this house? To give you maybe a little bit of a buffer room when there is some complexity that it's like, oh man, I didn't account for that. That's going to take us an extra few hours here. John mentioned it earlier too, is that like, some projects you're going to win more so than on others. I think the goal is to like make sure you don't lose money on any project. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's also like try not to get too caught up in the details. If you're doing hundreds and hundreds of projects a year and one or two of them go a little bit sideways, as a business, you're going to be okay.
Yeah, so I agree. And I think one of the critical things that people talk about with production rates is that, well, what are these averages? Um, how can there be an average painter? We've had that question a couple times here. Um, and so we're looking for, we pay people different amounts, and we're trying to figure out an average of that as well in our calculation of our hourly rate. And so, you know, that all that all's there to kind of help average things out, and then you have different production rates between people. Yeah,
Yeah, I do. I mean, there's a lot of people asking for production rates, John. I think there's an opportunity to try to share something like that. We got to figure
sure,
out a good way to do that. I do think we talk about a lot of these. I know we're trying to put out more videos on YouTube. We've done a bunch of interior videos. Not sure if they're all posted yet, where we're walking through. Um, I know that's, maybe not quite as helpful as just having a list, which I think we could probably put together.
absolutely. Yeah, any other questions here? Feel free to throw them in the chat. Um, maybe we can talk about this really quickly, Michael. And that looks like um, so one question people are asking is, paint upgrades. Doing an exterior home,
We do it
somebody
all the
wants
time.
to do a paint upgrade. How would they go about doing that?
Yeah, we do that all the time. It's going to be at a like area so that you can create that as an option. Um, for example, our standard exterior paint is Sherwin-Williams Emerald, and then we will give an upgrade option for the Sherwin-Williams Emerald Rain Refresh. Substitute whatever products you use. I'm not here to debate between Benjamin Moore or Sherwin-Williams. I don't really care, or whatever. And so, we would have so whatever the difference is in that price. So let's just say it's $20 per gallon. We know how many gallons because we can just go back and look through the work order like you showed before, and I can just add an optional area, upgrade to Sherwin-Williams Rain refresh, and whatever. I know I've got 25 gallons times the extra $20 I need to charge, 500 bucks, something like that.
Perfect. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think, for us, if we're doing an all-in hourly rate, we know that, 10% of our cost is paint, and whatever percentage difference that additional paint is going to be, we just have to make sure we account for that at the hourly rate level.
Hmm.
So, same thing, just a percentage increase for that option. We'll do it as a line item usually.
Yeah.
So, um, does that make any questions on that, everybody,
Yeah,
for
hopefully,
paint
yeah.
costs?
'Cause I think like one thing that can get a little confusing is once you group everything, it makes it harder to like pull things out as an option, or makes
Mhm.
it kind of impossible, I guess. And so like that's where you want to have that as like an area. I think it's an area or a substrate or a line item, I should say, sorry, so that it's not a substrate, so that you can pull that out separately
Yeah.
as an option.
All right. Yeah, looks
I
like.
know, I mean, some
Oh,
people are
sorry.
asking about like marketing, leads, CRMs. We do cover those topics on the podcast, and on I think a lot of those or all those get shared on the YouTube channel. Um, Again, this is not the point of today's webinar. Maybe have another webinar where we can talk about that. I think one of the first podcasts we did, roughly almost a year ago, I don't remember when it came out, was on like preparing for winter and, what are some creative things you can do to generate leads in a slow time. Um, oh, by the way, it's, beginning of August as we're doing this, and winter is coming. At Textbook, we start our winter prep in August. Um, and I would encourage everyone to go check that out. I'm sure John will record something similar again here to kind of refresh that.
Yeah, and Tyler's asking what the name of it is. It's called Price Sell Paint, and Michael and I talk about some of these things as well as interview top people in the industry and top sales reps too. It's really interesting to learn from them and what their strategies are uh, to just doing really well, selling a lot of painting.
Yeah, I mean
Um,
we have reps on there selling 2, 3+ million a year as individuals. And so, definitely if you haven't had a chance yet, check it out. There's a lot of really good wisdom being
put in the
shared.
chat here. Price sell, sell paint. Jake, you're asking here about discount for lower paint. Same theory applies as the one we were talking about before, which is, you're just going to do a percentage discount off of what the gallonage is or off your hourly rate. So put that in there. Sell paint.
There we go.
Sell paint. There we go.
Thank you, everyone.
Oh, got in there. Okay. Um, Let me see. We got another question here in the Q&A. Okay, so triangle areas, how to measure them. And I think Rick had also asked about gable ends on houses, surfaces that goes into a triangle. Michael, how do you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, length times width divided by two.
Mhm.
We kind of remember that from our whatever eighth grade geometry class. The that's the accurate answer, right? So that's going to give us the accurate answer. With
Can you
that being,
say that one more time?
so it's your triangle, right? So it's
Yeah,
your whatever 30 feet wide, and your a story 10 feet tall is your 300, but it's a triangle, so do we have to divide it by two, which is going to give us 150 square feet based on the example measurements. That's the that's like the book answer, right? The way that I would challenge you though is that generally those triangles are at the top of the house, and so they're going to be the most difficult, complicated, and so you might not necessarily need to divide it by two to account for the complexity that's there, right? Getting to that difficult area, we all know it's more difficult to paint when you're on a 32-foot ladder than it is when you're on the ground. And so like that might be the way to account for that is just don't worry about like just that it's 30 feet and it's 10, just call it 300. That's going to give your crew an extra whatever hour to hour and a half or whatever based on your production rate to account for the ladder movements and stuff like that on that third story.
absolutely. Um, yeah, same answer for
Uh,
me.
yeah,
Same answer, exact same answer. So, um, it looks like we got a few people dropping off. Before everybody leaves, I just need to mention, you can, if you guys enjoy this, we're going to be posting more of these things in the PaintScout Pros group, which you may have heard about this from. So feel free to join that. That's in Facebook. It's a Facebook group just for PaintScout users and people that care about this kind of stuff. Uh, Always send your questions in. Feel free to send us more questions. We're here to help educate too. I mean, Michael and I have a lot of experience. We're happy to share. So feel free to send that to us if you have any other questions. And in terms of this production rate thing, I think that's a big thing we're hearing. So we'll try to tackle that at some
Mhm.
point. Let's just see if there's any questions here before we go. We've
Th-
got, let's see. Yeah, so pre-can substrate levels, absolutely, we can work on
Sure.
that. Um, I think,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, I think as obviously as somebody's new coming into Paint Scout, I think like, helping them get their stuff set up correctly the first time should be a good goal. I think for a lot of the people that are on this call, they're already using Paint Scout. And so it's like, how do we get in there and change them? I think, John, we probably, first of all, let's create an Excel document that we can share.
sure.
So, I'll kind of hold you to that. And two, though, I think doing either a live webinar or just a recorded video on like how we use these production rates, right? Like a small, medium, large window, needs a little bit of explanation, as opposed to just like putting it in a spreadsheet where without any context that could be misunderstood.
For
And so I
sure.
think both of those things coming soon for sure.
Yeah, I think one can't exist without the other. So for those interested, I mean, like when going back to that story I told about getting the first set of production rates I ever had, um, it was great, but it's not perfect, and I had to learn how to use that. It's almost like it's just like any tool. You have to learn how to use the tool, and if you just accept it for what it is, it might steer you wrong. And so there's no perfect answer here, but there is baseline starting points you can build off of as you go and make judgment calls. So um, Neri's asking, sorry, would you like to see? I would like to see the option to change paint materials universally on the estimate, without having to go line item by item. Yeah,
I agree.
we totally get that. Um, it's
I
a
want that too.
it
I'm
yeah,
not
it
smart enough. I
is
have no idea how any of that stuff works, but that's a good thought right there. Yeah.
it's a very good thought, something we've been working on for a long time. Not as easy of a great problem, not as easy as of a solution. So we are we are working on that.
Yeah, I know. I'm not smart enough to figure that out. I can figure out the area of a triangle, but that's about
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Tyler, yeah, thank you. Software's hard. It's you get it, Tyler. Other it's not as easy as it looks.
Yeah.
So we appreciate the feedback though. Thank you. Everyone, thanks so much for showing up. We really appreciate it. Feel free to, give us any feedback. We love it that you can share with us how this is going, whether this was good. Feel free to, leave some comments here in the webinar chat. We'll leave it open here for a minute. Whether you guys found this helpful or other areas that we could improve. So
Yep.
thank you for your time. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thanks for letting me be a part of it. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Everyone have a great day. We will talk to you soon. Thank you.